Welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast, where we deep dive into the best matches in AEW history. Brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network and your host, Sam Brown. Hello and welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sam Brown. Thank you for joining me. Today, we continue with the fourth season of the Match Guide, where we will be looking beyond the ropes of Tony Khan's ring to the matches, wrestlers, promotions, and movements that influenced all elite wrestling. If you enjoy the show today, you can subscribe or rate it on your podcast app of choice, support the Social Suplex podcast financially through Red Circle, and make sure you check out all of the other great shows on the Social Suplex Podcast Network, where we cover all aspects of the world of pro wrestling. We've got One Nation Radio, Keeping It Strong Style, All Things Elite, Tunnel Talk, the Trish and Shara Wrestling Podcast, Wrestle Art with Chris Things, Imp's AEW Adventure, and Joshying Around. And you can subscribe to the Social Suplex newsletter at socialsuplex.com/newsletter. Become part of the Social Suplex community by joining our Discord, where you can chat with the hosts of all our podcasts, as well as other wrestling fans from around the world. Links for all of these things are in the podcast description. My guest for today is a retired writer and podcaster from Wrestling Headlines and the former Lords of Pain radio, but still an avid watcher of wrestling from all times and places. It's Mizfan, and we're looking at Eddie Kingston versus Mike Quackenbush for the CHIKARA Grand Championship at CHIKARA High Noon, November 13, 2011. Hello, Mizzy. How are you going today?
It's going all right. Thanks for having me on the show. Greetings, Mizfan fans. It's great to talk to you all again out there. That name has less and less relevance to what I watch every year, but I don't think I can shake it at this point. Mizfan.
He is still wrestling, though. He is still on WWE.
I caught him in the Royal Rumble, and I thought he looked better than a lot of them out there, to be honest. But that was no way to judge any roster, so we'll just leave that alone.
I remember seeing I think it's actually the last match that Mick Foley has ever had, and it's against Ric Flair in TNA. And they're doing this wild promo where they obviously had no plan, and they're both just going crazy in the ring, on the mic. And one of the things that Ric Flair said was, "I've been doing this for 40 years," and the Miz has hit 20. Like, he's over 20 at this point, well over 20.
Yeah,
I wonder if he's going to hit 40 years at some point.
Yeah, no, he's really stuck around. He put in work that nobody thought he would, but we're not here to talk about the Miz.
Absolutely not.
Something much more interesting. So.
Yeah. Ever since I've known you, it's funny how you've got Mizfan as your name. It's such your nickname. Obviously, that's for those who don't know, that's from the old Lords of Pain boards that we were on when everyone had a nickname, and I've just always called you Mizzy ever since then, even though that place doesn't exist anymore. But ever since I've known you, like, it's so funny that Mizfan is your nickname, because I've always admired just how broad of appreciation you have for wrestling, like the different places from all times and places around the world. I'm curious, just to get us started, what have you been watching lately, Mizfan?
Sure. Well, I'll just clarify for everyone. I picked that name in, I think, about 2009 for my screen name. So shall we all not be judged for the things we did in 2009? But I'll always have a kind word for my guy, The Miz, even when others don't. These days, though, I don't see much of him. I am watching AEW on the regular, catch most everything that they put out. It's not my favorite company of all time, but it's my favorite company going right now, I think. They do a lot of things right, a lot of things that I enjoy. I try to cherry pick from different places around the world. I just watched a wonderful Stardom match from February that was really just some fantastically intense, exciting stuff. You catch some lucha, you catch some of this and that, and I've always said that wrestling is deep and wide, so I hope that people are always leaving themselves open to go out and find some things. Currently in the midst of trying to watch as much SmackDown, old SmackDown as I can before it falls off the streaming service here and goes into the vault. So that's been fun and nostalgic. And then also, as you know, I've been kind of doing some research for this Greatest Wrestler Ever voting project that's going to be coming up in a few months, I think, from when we're recording this. So a lot of great old classic stuff. I've been into the early 80s, Classic Joshi, Jaguar Yokota, Devil Masami, Dump Matsumoto, Old Territories, Playboy Buddy Rose up in Portland, Nick Bockwinkel in the AWA. You go to the UK, and you've got Jim Breaks and Johnny Saint and just tons of great old folks. So, if you ever feel like there's nothing fun to watch in wrestling, I got to tell you, man, it's out there. You just got to go for it.
You're just saying names there, Mizzy, and it's like I'm listening to. It's like me when I start talking about 2000s cricket with another Australian who's about my age, and we just start saying Steve Waugh, Shane Warne, and it's just like you're just immediately flooded with a feeling of like everything's going to be all right. We're safe. Everything's going to be all right. You said exciting and intense for that starter match, and I think that's a good way to segue into what we're going to be talking about, which of course is Eddie Kingston versus Mike Quackenbush today. Just before we do get into it, though, on a serious note, we are going to be talking about the wrestling promotion CHIKARA and its owner Mike Quackenbush in this episode. And before we get to the match, both Mizzy and I thought it was important to note up front that in 2020. CHIKARA was closed by Quackenbush amidst allegations of inappropriate conduct by him, wrestlers that performed for him in CHIKARA, and trainers at his wrestling school, the Wrestle Factory. This included numerous accounts of racist, sexist, and homophobic language by Quackenbush himself, and additional allegations of sexual abuse by people employed underneath him that he covered up. Both myself and Mizfan want to note the seriousness of these allegations, and that in discussing this match and Quackenbush himself, in no way do we condone or excuse these behaviours. Mizzy, is there anything you want to add there before we move forward?
Not too much. I'm glad it's something that you said. Obviously, a lot came out of that 2020 period when I won't say a lot of facts were exposed because it seemed like certain people knew them all along, but a lot of us were kind of introduced to a darker side of certain people and places in wrestling. Nothing is ever simple, but I would hope we can all agree that there's not room in wrestling for certain kinds of behavior. So it happened as it happened, and I hope that we can look back positively on the many great times of CHIKARA while still acknowledging problems that were under the surface that we didn't know about.
100%. I'll just agree with you there. There's not much more I want to say about it beyond just it's sad that these things are still showing up in wrestling and that 2020 wasn't the sort of line underneath things that it should have been. And even in the biggest promotions in the world, there is still a culture of this that is evident to this day and being dragged through courts to this day. And that is a sad fact of being a wrestling fan, that you need to acknowledge these things before we get into what is, something that was great that was created in this promotion by some of these people.
Well said.
Yeah. So let's move along because as soon as I started thinking about this season, which is moving beyond AEW, I wanted to talk about CHIKARA. Not because I was ever a massive fan into it. I actually never watched it in real time. But of all the American indie promotions of the 2000s and 2010s, it seems like by some stretch to be the most creative and unique offering that was out there, at least on a large scale. And the more that I've looked into it and thought about it, looked at the wrestlers that came through it, the more I can see the influence that it has had on the styling of wrestling that is out there today, be it the high flying stylings that are out there, the comedy that is there, and also the way they approach storytelling. Mizzy, I know you're a big fan of the promotion. Tell me, what was CHIKARA?
Well, that's a larger question than I think we can probably answer in the time that we have on this show. But to keep it as succinct as possible, I think you put it well when you put the first foot forward, just talking about the sheer creativity of this little indie promotion that could. The only other promotion I can think of at all that ever had this kind of ambitious creativity would be Lucha Underground, another show that I love very dearly. And CHIKARA, of course, was out there doing it more than a decade before and on about 1/100th if they're lucky, of the budget, that promotion ever had. Founded in 2002 by Mike Quackenbush and a very influential wrestler called Reckless Youth. It's a company that grew over the years and gained really tremendous fan support, became known for creative and intricate stories, became known for colorful characters, and storylines that were not something that you could really see anywhere else, that would incorporate elements of fantasy or comedy or all sorts of different things. It was very outside the box a lot of the time, but it also kind of had something for everyone, because you had your kind of wacky characters, your comedy here and there, but also there was this incredibly broad house style, and a lot of that came out of the trainings of Mike Quackenbush, Chris Hero, Claudio Castagnoli, others who were in charge of that promotion, particularly in the early days, and training the wrestlers and just incorporating this beautiful mix, not just of what we think of as American indie wrestling, which it helped shape, but also a strong lucha influence, a strong Puro influence, not just in the New Japan school strong style that we might think of, but also Kings Road and Lucha Resu of Dragon Gate and the Chinoku Pro. So you get all of this, and then even like European styles, catch styles, lots and lots of things all mixed together. Not just the comedy, not just kind of like the silly laughs, but you've got the lucha masks and characters. You've got guys like Eddie Kingston who are actually just tough as nails fighters, and they're not silly at all. You've got masterful technicians like Mike Quackenbush. It was just such a broad tent and so ambitious. It remains one of my favorite promotions in history, and I really admire all that they were able to accomplish. Basically, on a shoestring and a dream.
The way that I've seen it described many, many times, and even by Quackenbush himself, is inspired by comic books. In that you've got so many of this broad array of characters, and they're always interacting and bumping up against each other. And sometimes they're off on their own little quest, but then sometimes everything comes together and they all have to team up to do something. And I think you can see that in the way, particularly the structure. You've got a lot of singles, but then the most famous thing that CHIKARA had, or the most prominent thing, was the King of Trios competition, which was an annual trios competition that would happen. And you would get wrestlers from all over the place. Like, you name a wrestler that wrestled in indie wrestling in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and they have wrestled in that King of Trios. You've got guys like the Young Bucks, El Generico, Orange Cassidy, Brody King, Claudio Castagnoli, Chris Hero, like you name it, Zack Sabre Jr., they're there. Those were amongst the most popular, DVDs that were going around at the time, which was, how wrestling was distributed, how indie wrestling was distributed at that point was through DVDs. They were amongst the most popular of the DVDs that were going around, the King of Trios competitions. But, and that's these characters all sort of coming together and having to form these teams and going against each other to be the team that is crowned the King of Trios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So much, many wonderful memories out of King of Trios. I attended 2 weekends live while it was going on, and some of the most fondly remembered times I ever spent going out, like on a trip to do anything, let alone just wrestling. So wonderful times. So many great wrestlers, just as you said, and so many more, because they would bring in folks that you would never expect. They helped X-Pac do like kind of a little mini career renaissance. They had Glacier there, I think, a couple of times. One Man Gang famously did his strut off with Larry Sweeney. Scott Steiner was there once. Jordan Grace was there once. Nick Gage was there once. Like, anyone you could think of, they were able to open the tent wide and have some kind of crazy interaction. And it was just a very enjoyable experience.
Another thing I would add as well is it was always very open that it wanted to be family friendly. So, where you've got other promotions that, allow like profanity and a lot of blood and that sort of stuff, these guys were like, no, we want to be we're comic books. Comic books are for all ages. We want to be for all ages. And that sort of brings me to
I have one funny story about that I'll tell very quickly, and then we can get on with it. The first game of trios I went to was in 2015, and one of the teams was a Lucha team, and who should be on that team but Phoenix, now known much better from playing in AEW and now WWE. And I don't know if he didn't get the memo or what, but one of my strongest memories of that weekend is right in the middle of the match. He kicked his opponent, stuck his two middle fingers up in the air, and started shouting out F-bombs at him about as loudly as he could. And that was quite a little controversy. I think the wrestling fans were more amused than offended, but I just have to share that because I don't think I ever saw somebody swear with so much passion, and it was just very funny, the place that he chose to do it in. So,
of all the people as well, like it's not like he's going, I would expect that from the person we're going to talk about today. But,
sure. You think?
There you go. It's a great one. Look, and that like colorful, that family friendly nature also kind of went to the way that wrestlers were presented. These very colorful costumes, lots of masks. Teams have got bright colors and that sort of thing. It very much stood out from the sort of indie. Everyone wearing black and red and dark colors. It was sort of the style of the time. Yeah, and look, that sort of segues us interestingly to one of the subjects that we're going to talk a lot about today, which is Eddie Kingston. This is a guy who sort of came out of CZW and, known for doing death matches and really, if you look at him today, like a guy who is really gruff and rough, bit of a brawler, really gritty. An interesting fit in this sort of comic book environment, if I may say so, but he sort of really made it his home. Like this was his home for the longest period. If there's a promotion that he is most associated with in his time on the indies, it's probably CHIKARA, and it's kind of a strange fit, but it really works.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, Eddie Kingston is a guy who really put CHIKARA on his back, maybe more than anyone, and kind of spread the word around as best he could. And it was odd at times because you're right. He was different in tone than what a lot of people think of in the promotion. But it was his home. He was trained in part by Quackenbush and the school there. He came in very early on, I think at the end of the first season, the second class of graduates, when they were kind of co-training with CZW, which is why he also had connections there. But yeah, over the years, I don't know if anybody stood with CHIKARA higher than Eddie Kingston did, and he didn't do it by being, a goof. But you want to talk comic books, here's your Wolverine, This is a guy kind of in a colorful world, and it's not that he's not colorful in and of himself, but he also kind of has a wounded heart on his sleeve, and he'll keep fighting, as tough as he can through all the challenges that come up. So he's a guy I was very much drawn to when I first started watching CHIKARA, and I'm so pleased that now a lot more people know who he is.
Well, let's get to the match that we're looking at today, because a big part of his journey is this particular match and why he is so well remembered. So this match is centered around the promotion's first ever singles world championship, the CHIKARA Grand Championship. It was announced over 9 years after the promotion was started. So it was in January 2011. That in itself is pretty wild that they waited so long to crown a world champion or crown a grand champion. Most promotions, that's probably the first thing on the list that they would do, but not CHIKARA. They waited a long time to do that. So it was announced by the director of fun, who's sort of their GM. Mizzy, you're going to have to forgive me here. Wink Vavusa.
Wink Vavasour, yeah.
Wink Vavasour. He announced that later in January 2011, he announced that later in the year, a tournament would be held to crown the company's first ever singles champion. Wrestlers would then have to solicit votes from other wrestlers on the roster to gain entry into a 12-man round-robin bracket. with the winner of each side going into the final. Like, that's a pretty cool way to crown your first ever champion. Have the wrestlers vote who's going to be in there. That leaves things open for like heels to like sort of gang up and rig the vote together. But also it sort of like shows the allegiances of people and really helps them select the best of the best, because it's the wrestlers themselves who are selecting.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a very nice touch, and it highlights one of the greatest things about CHIKARA, in my opinion, is that it was often extremely character-driven. These were not just like little flat cartoon characters. They would have deep histories. It would be sort of comic book reminiscent. Things that happened in years before wouldn't be easily forgotten. So you would see these different allegiances coming out. And it often was not cleanly divided lines from one to the next. So yeah, it's a very cool way, I think, to create a tournament format.
It's worth us noting that a lot of this tournament came in the wake of the death of Larry Sweeney, who's a long-term CHIKARA favorite, close friend with Eddie Kingston, close friend with Mike Quackenbush. He's someone we've actually mentioned on this podcast years ago at this point, when we were talking about Eddie Kingston versus John Moxley, because Eddie Kingston brings him up when he's talking about in the build to that. Larry Sweeney took his own life in April of 2011. And as such, the tournament was named after him, the 12 Large Summit. Mizzy, we spoke briefly about Larry Sweeney years ago, as I said, when we're talking about that. Is there anything you'd like to add about Larry Sweeney at this point? Because his memory looms very large over this tournament and match.
And well, it should. If anyone has never had an opportunity to check out Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney, I hope that you will do so. He's probably known a little better as a manager. He worked for several years in Ring of Honor under that role, but a spectacular wrestler as well, a wonderful throwback, just a man who was quick-witted and could play a spectacular heel. It's hard to even put into word how great I think Larry Sweeney was and how far he might have gone in another circumstance. I think it's worth saying that, unfortunately, due to mental health issues, he could not continue on that path that I think he would have shown so brightly on. So a reminder, I guess, to, hold each other close and to take care of yourselves out there struggling with any issues.
100%. After that, matches got underway in May, and the participants ended up being, I'll just run through the different blocks that they had. So in Block A, you had Mike Quackenbush, Icarus, Halloween, Sarah Del Rey, who is now trainer in WWE, Ophidian, I think it's pronounced that way. Yeah. And Claudio Castagnoli. And then in Block B, Eddie Kingston, Fire Ant, who is most popularly known as Orange Cassidy, Jigsaw, Ultramantis Black, Vin Gerard, and then Brody Lee. Yes, that Brody Lee. Just a few notes with this. Brody Lee was actually out injured, so he ended up having to forfeit all of his matches, unfortunately. And Claudio Castagnoli signed with the WWE halfway through. He was able to continue towards the end, but that was probably something they didn't factor in. And of course, Eddie Kingston and Mike Quackenbush ended up wrapping things up on the final day of the tournament to cement their places in the finals. Mizzy, I know you weren't watching at the time. Do you know much about how this tournament played out, or any sort of stories or quirks from it as it went through?
Yeah, you're correct. I didn't come to watch CHIKARA in real time until about 2014 when they came back from their famous or maybe infamous hiatus. But I definitely know a lot about the tournament. I've checked out quite a bit of it over the years as I dug back into CHIKARA history. And there's a lot of small stories going on in there. It's a very loaded group. A lot of the names you just shouted out can be very recognizable to people as current and future greats of that time. The main story ended up being about Eddie Kingston and Mike Quackenbush. You got Mike Quackenbush, the founder of the promotion, the guy who trained a lot of these guys, and certainly seems like he'd be a shoo-in for the Grand Championship. And then you got Eddie Kingston, who, as you said, is kind of a rough fit at times, and yet with a heart the size of the mountain, and coming in with this shadow of Larry Sweeney over his shoulder, and all of his feelings kind of bubbling up and overflowing as he tries to fight his way through this tournament on sheer heart. And you'll see in the match, there were a lot of obstacles in his way. He took a lot of damage, particularly it's kind of well known that his knee was in rough shape, and a lot of people took advantage of that. And he definitely came in banged up physically and emotionally, but I think it only heightened the feeling of the match when you really got down to it.
If anything, this match is known for the promo that Eddie Kingston cuts in the weeks leading up to the match. We definitely have to take a moment to talk about, because truly, if you've never seen this promo before, it's one, and you've enjoyed anything Eddie Kingston has done in AEW, then press pause, Google Eddie Kingston High Noon, watch that. My description of it is not going to do it justice. It is one of the best pro wrestling promos I've seen. In it, Eddie says this is the biggest match of his life. It's the biggest match of Chikara's 10-year history. He says 2011's been a horrible year for him, but it can be out the window. All the trauma of his life and the bad things he has done, it will be out the window, because if he wins that championship, it will be his redemption, his penance. Like, it's a religious thing for him. He talks about Larry Sweeney, how much that Sweeney meant to him, and how he will be watching overhead, and how there's no way he will let Sweeney down. He's let people down in his life, and he promises to put on the performance that no one has seen before. He says he will crawl on his hands and knees to Philadelphia because he needs it so badly, and he promises to not let people down anymore. Busy, this is like just I'm getting goosebumps and spine tingles, like just saying these words and picturing it. This is incredible pro wrestling verbiage from Eddie Kingston.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I always said about Eddie Kingston, he'll rip his own heart out to make the match. It's almost not even about the match at this point. It is, because the match is so important to him, but it has this importance to it that goes beyond what you traditionally think of as pro wrestling. You really feel like his heart, his soul, they're on the line here, and not in anybody can say that, but God, you watch this, and if you don't feel the genuine emotion just like pouring through the screen, then you need to get your sensors checked or something, because this is everything to Eddie Kingston. There's no play acting here. This is about as real to him that it can get, and by the force of his emotion, you feel the reality of it as well. It's an incredible piece of business.
And the unspoken thing in this is he's talking about letting people down as he talks about his best friend who committed suicide. And the unspoken thing is he feels like he let Larry Sweeney down, and he says I'm not going to let people down anymore. When he's talking about this championship being his penance, the incredible weight that he is putting on himself, the emotional weight that he's putting on himself heading into this match, and how much this championship is going to mean to him it's titanic. And you can see it in his eyes, the fire, the pain, the heart in his eyes. And, there's this moment where he just beats his chest when he says he needs this. And it's just so raw and visceral.
Yeah, it's really special. And you can see the connection between these two guys if you watch the history of CHIKARA and anywhere else they interacted. But they interacted a lot in CHIKARA. And, sometimes they feud and sometimes they'd be friends. But, underneath it, there's this feeling of these two guys that really had this incredible closeness. And they're also both two guys who were kind of never supposed to make it. Neither of them was really kind of the right shape. They weren't the right style either for CHIKARA, certainly not for ROH of the time, that indie. You wouldn't see you're not going to see Eddie Kingston in the X division or something, if you're talking about the 2000s. Even now, look how long it took still for Eddie Kingston to make it on a national stage, as good as he is. But they weren't supposed to make it, these two guys. And in the end, Larry Sweeney didn't make it, which is a terrible tragedy on so many levels. So for Eddie Kingston to still be in there fighting for that, it means something, it really actually means something.
Yeah. Let's get to the match. And as we always do here on the Match Guide, we'll give it its flowers. The Wrestling Observer, Dave Meltzer, I'm very disappointed. No rating. Oh, what on earth?
I don't think Meltzer ever watched CHIKARA one time in his life. So, that's fine. He's
missed out. He has missed out.
Agreed.
Cage Match has this rated at 8.98. It's the second highest singles match of Eddie Kingston's career, the third highest single match of Mike Quackenbush's career, and the second highest singles match of CHIKARA, the sixth highest generally. There's a few trios matches in there that sort of get bumped up, but this is a match that in the history of the promotion and the history of both men's career looms very large. And you get that feeling when they're in the ring. It's the ECW arena. It's a super historic feeling. You've got Tommy Dreamer in Eddie Kingston's corner, which is fitting given where they are. You've got Mike Quackenbush has got Jigsaw, so he's, I believe, beloved CHIKARA wrestler in his corner, and partner of Quackenbush. Quackenbush gets this huge introduction, particularly noting all of his accomplishments in the promotion, and it's a really nice contrast with Eddie Kingston, who has none of those accomplishments. And the referee, of course, is Bryce Remsburg. Who else was it going to be?
For a match like this, I interviewed Bryce some years ago, so I don't know if this is still true, but he said it was his favorite match he ever refereed at that time. He's had a lot of big ones since then, but I got to believe it's still a special place in his heart.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like it would have to be, if given his history with CHIKARA as well, like and the way that the weight of these people's friends' lives that are hanged over this sort of match. I can't imagine it's something that would be easy to forget. The commentators, Gavin Loudspeaker and Leonard F. Chikarison, I'm guessing those are kayfabe names. They talk up the historic nature of the bout. The crowd's like very hot starting off. I think the commentators do a really good job setting the scene. They're talking about how similar yet different Eddie and Quackenbush are. They're both sort of reclusive, hold their few friends tight. Most people they hold at arm's length, but both were close to Sweeney and both are close to Jigsaw. It's such an interesting contrasting characters with Quackenbush and Kingston, how different they are, but how similar they are, how many similarities they've got as well. Yeah,
that's very true. And I think accurate to real life as well. I mean, I think you can find examples of both Eddie and Quackenbush being hard to get along with at certain times in certain ways, not in the same ways, and yet there is a similarity there, I think. Interesting as well to note, this is actually your first ever singles meeting, I do believe. So even though they shared almost a decade of the same promotion together, it's the first time they cross paths one-on-one.
Well, that's something that that Tony Khan's taken from this, I guess, is that you keep your big names separate for really, really long times, and you don't let Eddie Kingston wrestle with all of the top stars that you wanted to see him wrestle with.
You could put Eddie with a few more top stars.
You could have a Hangman feud at some point, I reckon. Maybe one of these days. Like Eddie, he's physically dominant early on. He's able to manhandle Quackenbush fairly easily, but you can see immediately like Quackenbush is working technically. He zeroes in on Eddie's knee. I really like how fluid and what I describe that as is fluid yet felt the chain wrestling is. So often I feel like when there's chain wrestling, the people are just floating and there's no real sense of effort. But in this, you can feel the struggle. You can feel the effort that goes into each hold. And you can see how Quackenbush is like maneuvering and how he is just like a master of this domain. And how he has so many ways that he can catch Eddie and get him where he wants him to be.
Absolutely. Mike Quackenbush is a student of just about every style of wrestling, I think, but none more so than the old world of sports, UK style, which was about as technical as any style has ever been, I think. And the way he applies it, in my opinion, is really brilliant. He does a great job in this match. He knows he's going to have to use it to overcome Eddie, who's the superior striker. He's a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. But he knows, everyone knows, the crowd knows that Eddie has that bad wheel, that banged up knee, and both the way he goes after it to change the shape of the match and the way they get the fans to react to those moments, I think, is just as great as anything else you can point to in this match.
There's one particular sort of chain of moves that I love that Quack did. So it's still really early on. Eddie gets to the break, he gets to the ropes, breaks it, but even as he's moving to the center, Eddie sort of takes a wild swipe at Quackenbush, but Quack I'm just going to call him Quack. Is that okay? That's what I'm going to call him.
He was often called Quack. Yes.
Yeah, he just rolls through so smoothly, uses the momentum from both of them to just stomp Eddie's knee into the canvas. It's so smooth but brutal at the same time. And the only other guy that I can feel like is the master of this styling in the way that I like is Zack Sabre Jr., who is, bar none, the top technical wrestler in the world right now. And I feel like he has taken a lot of I know Zack Sabre Jr. spent time in CHIKARA, so I have no doubt that he took some learnings from Quackenbush.
I have no doubt as well. And of course, Sabre coming out of the UK, he had direct influence from that old World of Sport style. Quack and Sabre had a match or two in their time, and it was quite brilliant stuff, in my opinion. So I have no doubt that there's an influence there.
I really liked with Quackenbush as well. Obviously you've got Eddie's incredible selling as Quackenbush is tackling him. He's at one point he's yelling you've got to break it off at Quack, you've got to break my leg off. But Quackenbush starts to get more desperate. He does an eye poke. He starts taking longer to break off the holds than is, what people would consider fair game. It's really good at communicating the stakes of this. He's not going fully bad guy. He's not a total bad guy, but he's feeling the pressure of the moment. He really wants to win. And so he's just starting to nudge the rules up with slightly dirtier tactics. And the crowd starts to turn on Quackenbush at that. And Quack then starts to lean into it as the crowd and goes with the crowd, is listening to the crowd. But his body language really starts to get more cocky over time as this match goes through.
Yeah, absolutely. The crowd control of this match is so spectacular because you've got Kingston doing incredible selling. I know people have compared his performance in this match to the best of Toshiaki Kawada, who was also extremely good at conveying both that he was hurt and yet that he was still tough and still fighting. And Kingston, of course, takes a lot of influence, the black and the yellow, that's connected to Kawada, and then back to, Tenryu from that. But the side that was Mike Quackenbush's is just as good. Just as you say, we knew coming in that the crowd was going to end up favoring Eddie Kingston just because of the emotional weight of this match. And yet nobody really wants at this time to disrespect Mike Quackenbush, yet how much is on the line for him here? He didn't cut a promo pouring his heart out because that was just not his style. And yet it's your own promotion. It's your own title. You literally train this guy. The pressure to show that you really are on top of this mountain that is CHIKARA is incredible. And it does push you to do things that you wouldn't normally do. And then push it a little farther. Eddie's a little tougher than you thought, a little more resilient. He's not going down to your holds. He's coming back up again after he does go down. What are you going to do next? The progression is wonderful. None of it is rote. None of it is phoned in. It is so felt in the moment, and the way they bring the crowd along for that ride is really fantastic.
Yeah. And, I've been talking a lot about the stakes of this match and the feeling of importance this match gets. There's only 900 people in the room, but it just feels so important because of the stakes Eddie Kingston's put on it, because this is the first singles championship, and that gets ratcheted up as this match goes through the gears. And, at one point, Quack gets Eddie in this brutal looking stretch muffler, a move I normally don't like. It normally looks terrible. It looks incredible in this match, particularly because it's targeting the knee. And the crowd is chanting, "Please don't tap." And then as that's happening, just a who's who of the CHIKARA locker room just starts emptying out. And the commentators they don't want to just watch it on the monitor at the back. They want to be ringside. And, it's it continues to add weight, atmosphere, importance as these guys come out one after one, and the crowd reacts to it as well. They feed off that as well. You've got guys like the Young Bucks,
Yeah.
2.0, Daddy Magic and Cool Hand Air, Angelo Parker, El Generico, Colt Cabana, Sarah Del Rey, The Colony, so that's Orange Cassidy, as well as like a ton of wrestlers I don't know that feel really important in the moment. The crowd reacts to them coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a Chikara, I'll call it a trope, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, wrestlers would often come out to view in person if it was a really, really important match or a really, really high quality match. And this was very much both. So you look to see it. It does heighten the atmosphere even further. And yeah, I mean, everybody came out for this one. Reckless Youth came out for this one. I mentioned he was one of the founders, but he hadn't been seen in Chikara or any kind of wrestling for years at this point. So
wow,
even him to be here, yeah, like this, it really did feel important, and it just made it all that much better.
You know how we said this is a comic book promotion? You know what this reminded me of so much? And I know that this movie came after this, but it's based on comic book stuff. But in Endgame, at the end, it's the most important thing at the end of the movie, the climax of the movie. You have one person coming out of that portal, then another one, and then more and more. It's just like person after person. It's all these people that you've like watched these hours and hours of movies about, and you know all their relationships and their interactions, and they're all finally there for the climax of what's about to happen. And that's what's happening in this. Like it's just really good storytelling, characterful stuff, but just adds to the importance of this match. And I should add, as I said, the crowd is riding along with this. It really goes like up a notch when Eddie kicks out of it's a Michinoku driver called the Quacken driver. And people just start standing on their feet. They're shaking the guardrails. Tommy Dreamer at ringside, he's just like pumping his fists. He looks like he's about to turn Super Saiyan or something. It's just uproarious. And this time, Eddie starts attacking Quackenbush's leg, like kicking it out from under him, and the crowd is so into that. When Quack misses a top rope knee drop after sort of fighting for it from the top turnbuckle, fighting to get the top turnbuckle, Eddie then hits a back fist to Quackenbush's leg, and like Quackenbush's selling is so good, and it's like such a really cool way that Eddie turns the tables when he finally gets on the front foot.
Yeah, it's such excellent storytelling. Quackenbush came in here with a strategy, and I'm not going to say he thought it would be easy, but I think he conveyed very well that he thought, well, like, you're a good fighter, but I'm a technical guy, a submission guy. You have a bad knee. You can't win this match, like you're going to give me a good fight. Clearly was not prepared just for the sheer toughness of Kingston and also for some of the more intelligent moves that he was going to pull out here. I mean, I think there's a reasonable expectation that Kingston would have come into this match kind of just like a bull, and he did to a certain extent, but he was very smart as well. There are counters he does, there are escapes he does, there are so many little things. Like at one point, Quack, he moves to lock in what's known as the Chikara Special, which is kind of like the company's signature hold, and it's kind of been like, Quack is kind of used as like the top heel killer. Like it's like a very specialized submission that he usually uses on the top heels. So he's trying to lock that on Kingston. Kingston sees it coming right away. He makes that quick escape, and he comes back fighting even harder. Like, it's like the more you know about Chikara, the more you know about these guys, the more this match is rewarding, which is why, in addition to just being great coming in cold, you see this incredible crowd reaction for everything that's happening here. It really does feel like the culmination of like years of history and years of story all coming around this match.
Oh, I didn't even know that about the what do you call it, the CHIKARA special. Yep. That's so awesome. And the fact that, like, previously he's always used it on heels, and now he's using it to try and win this match. I could imagine if you're right to CHIKARA, you'd see that. It reminds me of just this year where Yota Tsuji uses the Boston Crab to beat Takeshita at Wrestle Kingdom. And it just means so much and elevates that match. Like, for me, it elevated that match so significantly, and the story and the meaning of that match, because he did that. And if I'd known that, I'm sure I would have also just loved that particular. I'd love it now you've told me about it. And I wanted to call out particularly Quackenbush's selling. He does not look like a pro wrestler. I work in business finance. He looks like, I could say this, he looks like a guy that works in business finance. But when he gets going, he throws himself at the mat to sell as hard as anyone I've seen. And I really appreciate like the wrestlers that sell well and that really let themselves ragdoll around. And in this match, he's selling and throwing himself around for Eddie, particularly when Eddie's kicking out his leg, as well as I've seen anyone.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the bumping, the selling, the way he leaned into the heel side. And, we know firsthand that any wrestler who's also a promoter and has their own promotion is going to have every temptation to kind of make themselves look as good as possible. And there's really just no aspect of that here, or I think in any part of CHIKARA, for all his faults. And he's got them on and off screen, obviously. But I think Quackenbush, at least in terms of his performance, was always very unselfish. And beyond that, I mean, you're right. He's not the traditional pro wrestler look. He usually he's not bulging with muscles. He doesn't have a frightening face, anything like that. But God, ring that bell, and man, you're gonna see some very special things. So it's well worth shouting out.
Yeah, the pair sort of, as we move towards then, they're like trading punches, but Quack now isn't able to damage Eddie because he's got a compromised leg. We get into that final stanza of the match. Eddie catches Quackenbush off the ropes with like a huge clothesline. He hits a trio of suplexes and then 2 back fists and gets the 1, 2, 3. And Eddie is the new champ. There's so much to love in this final little flurry. Mizzy, what are your thoughts on it?
It's just brilliant. It's perfect pro wrestling. It's the culmination of a culmination, a climax within the larger climax. People like to talk a lot about finishing stretches and how hot they can be. And it's just a beautiful example of that. And again, just seeped in so much meaning, I like PWG as much as the next guy, but it's kind of that indie-rific style that people like to talk about. And that can be fair or not, but God, you take a match like this where you can get kind of that frenetic pace, but it feels so well earned and it's so well built on top of everything else that's going on. And God, there's just nothing else like it,
Yeah, look, I'll take the ridiculous "this is wrestling" chant. If you can get an ending like this where literally like the camera is shaking because they're because the whole room is just vibrating and the wrestlers are moving around the ring so much and the wrestlers that aren't in the ring are just pounding on it so hard. You get this like really cool up close of Quackenbush's eyes as Eddie catches him. I think it's in a German suplex, and his eyes are as wide as you will see their dinner plates as his face goes over for the suplex and hits the ring. It's brilliant. And yeah, as you said, like the atmosphere, it's like a really dominant win in the end. It's not one of those where you've got like a whole series of counters, a la say like the New Japan style, which I love, it has its place. But in the end, Eddie is the emphatic victor of this. He hits the clothesline, he hits the suplexes, he hits 2 of his finishes. Quackenbush has no answer at this point, and he gets the 3 because he is the dominant winner of this match, which when you're crowning your first champion, I think that's as good a way to go as anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's wonderful stuff, and it's free on YouTube and you can go watch it. So why wouldn't you do it? Just if you haven't already. My God. Just living it all over again, talking about it is it is not long either. It's maybe like 20 minutes start to end. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It paces itself so well. It finishes when it should. It's really incredible stuff. And of course there's then the next part of it, which is the coronation, which you just know is going to be emotional. Eddie and Quack, they like sort of share a nice moment in the ring before Eddie rolls out and like he's propping himself up on the ropes with tears in his eyes. And then just to add to it, like Larry Sweeney's brother Oliver and Larry Sweeney's friend Amy come out to the ring to present the championship. At this point, like Eddie is inconsolable, as you would think. In these moments, Eddie Kingston, one of the things that makes Eddie Kingston so special is you can't tell the difference between him for real and him as a wrestler. This feels totally authentic, and I have no doubt
that is totally authentic, his reaction here. And, the emotional weight that him as a character has placed on this is equal to the emotional weight that he himself personally feels at this win. The crowd's, of course, chanting for Larry Sweeney. Eddie takes the mic. He gets Tommy Dreamer, puts the belt on around Eddie's waist. Eddie grabs a mic and then proceeds to challenge anyone from New York or that piece of crap in Florida. He's talking about TNA. And then he challenges CM Punk, Triple H, John Cena, and AJ Styles, saying he could beat them all. Mizzy, if it was anyone else at this moment, it would feel completely crass and out of place, but it's Eddie. So in the moment, it just feels electric, and the crowd's like behind him. They're like, yeah, you could beat CM Punk, Triple H, and John Cena, and AJ Styles.
If he had fought him on that night in that building, I believe that he could have beaten him. So
beautiful ceremony to finish it off, though. It's like such a lovely way to put a bow on this whole match.
Yeah. I mean, it's the culmination of just so many different things, of years of CHIKARA, of years of hard work by Eddie Kingston, being, underappreciated at times, overlooked at times. And then you throw in everything with Larry Sweeney. You throw in everything, like the whole atmosphere of the wrestling world at that time. And, it's just a wonderful moment. And I can't blame Eddie for 1 minute for being on top of that mountain and for putting over CHIKARA as hard as he possibly could, because when a thing is right, it's just right. And in that moment, it was about as right as I think it could possibly get.
100%. Let's move on to talking about the legacy of this match and sort of, the influence that it and CHIKARA have sort of had. This is like, you're a fan of this, so you're qualified to say this. This has got to be the high moment for the promotion when you look back historically on it. Like, I haven't thought, I don't think there's many nights that live up to this night for them.
Yeah, it's one of the very best, certainly. They had a lot of good nights over the years, so I don't want to speak out of turn and leave something out, but we're going to make the top five. It would have to be right, right up in there. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful climax of everything CHIKARA wanted to be. And I think I can say that authentically, because even though, it didn't have like silly comedy moments or like ludicrous masks or anything, the heart of CHIKARA, no matter what form it took, was to have this kind of amazing heart, I think. And it's great that it could display that in so many ways. And the way it displayed it here, I think, was just about perfect.
What do you think, like, say, the legacy of CHIKARA is on the American wrestling scene? What sort of influence do you feel that it had on what we see today?
I mean, I think you just have to look around and see how many CHIKARA veterans ended up being important in various places. I mean, especially with AEW, we have finally sort of seen the dam break, and a lot of these folks go on to get recognized in the way that they ought to have been. Eddie Kingston in particular. You mentioned Orange Cassidy, who wrestled under that name and primarily as Fire Ant for so many years. It was brilliant, and really nobody talked about him. And now he gets to do all the things that he's doing. But even like Sarah Del Rey, who's one of the best American female wrestlers, I think, ever, and how she kind of like shepherded in this amazing bump in in-ring quality within the WWE over the past 10 years for the women. And the rise of Claudio and the rise of Brody Lee before he tragically passed away, and just all these guys who got recognized in CHIKARA for years, not just like for a minute and then they, were called up. For years, these guys were in there just doing brilliant work, and the stories they would tell and the way they would approach wrestling, and I don't know, there's just a lot of influence there, I think. And whenever I see something that feels like it has an element of that heart of CHIKARA, that character-driven, history-driven, emotional aspect, it puts a smile on my face.
Something that I definitely have taken, not from this match specifically, but talking about CHIKARA generally, is the influence on storytelling, like what you're talking about with characters, real long-term arcs in in wrestling. That's not something that was really super common, and it's something you can sort of map out unintentionally. They did, wrestlers did, by drawing points A through B through C through D, and you can kind of draw a character arc. But it wasn't something that I don't know personally. We don't really know because it's not something that we let in on like such in-depth creative understanding of what's happening behind the scenes in things like WCW, WWE, in the territories. But I don't feel like there was like such an intentionally mapped out long-term character arc. And that is something that happens now. And interestingly, just a fortnight ago, so 2 weeks ago, I talked about the Young Bucks versus the Golden Lovers. And that is a match that is drenched in that exact same character, like long-term history and build, and, you know, different characters sort of colliding and splitting up and reuniting. That is a match that is drenched in that. And it's a thing that the Elite in particular, the Young Bucks, who they're ringside at this match, they have continued to really bring in AEW, you know, like the influence of the way that Hangman Page's character has gone through like such great sweeping arcs through AEW. The Bucks as well, like maybe like slightly inconsistently, but they're definitely have done that sort of thing and have been promoting that. And I think that's something that has become more and more popular as wrestling has become more of a television product and something that we think of as like, this is a television show. I'm going to absorb it as a television show. You know, the way that, say, the guys on Social Suplex Tunnel talk about wrestling, you know, they're not talking about it as wrestling. They're talking about it as this is television. You know, our old friend Samuel Plan used to say sports entertainment is dead. It's performance art. And I think these are all different ways of getting at this idea of storytelling. That CHIKARA is, I feel like, really at the forefront, or at the leading edge of creating and driving in wrestling.
Yeah, I think that's an assessment that I agree with very much. I think a lot of what they did was take certain threads, because like it's not like these stories never happened before, but they were kind of uncommon, and they said, what if we integrated this a lot more into wrestling, and what if we took influence from, you know, comics and movies, not to, you know, just fully imitate them, but to capture that kind of feeling of a real ongoing story with ongoing characters. And I think they did a wonderful job of it. And I think you're right that, I mean, a lot of folks have kind of carried that forward in different ways, some that I like more than others. I mean, the Young Bucks hung around CHIKARA quite a lot before they really blew up, so I don't really doubt that they had some influence there. They personally aren't among my favorites, but still, you can see the influence there, and I like that it spreads around because there are people who do it exceptionally well. I mean, you just look at what happened between Hangman and Swerve over the past year or two, and you can feel like this isn't something that happens without depth of character being carried across months and years and not just being forgotten. You know, I despise the word cinema being associated with wrestling because it has all the wrong connotations, but still, you know, there's something of that aspect there. Like you're watching a story with a certain cinematic quality. And I say that only in the positive light for the purpose of this conversation.
And I should say, I'm not saying that these stories get planned out, you know, with many years planned out in advance, but it's them taking character and storytelling seriously. So going, okay, this next thing I'm doing, how does that continue what my overall long-term storyline is? And this isn't a guy that you don't like, but I'm going to quote him, Kenny Omega. He once said, I don't think of wrestling storytelling in months or years. I think of it in decades. And, you know, that it's a little bit much for me, but like it gets at that idea, you know, that, you know, like this character that these wrestlers are portraying is a consistent thing that continues throughout. And because it's consistent, as it goes through has different experiences, bumps up against different characters, different things happen to it. It reacts naturally to that, which gives the natural next step to what's going on. You know, as I think probably the best demonstration of it has to be Hangman Adam Page in AEW with the way that, like, they didn't sit down in 2019 and go, okay, well, you're going to win the championship this way, and then we're going to then you're going to turn, we're going to put you in with this person who currently wrestles in NXT. He's going to come in and you're going to have this thing with him, and that's going to turn you heel eventually after a year of like going crazy. But then we're going to turn you back and you're going to go against John Moxley, who wrestles for the WWE right now. And we think might come over here. They're not doing it like that, but it's just these guys taking character seriously. And that's probably exactly the same as CHIKARA. Like, they didn't know who was about to get signed by WWE or TNA or whoever was, what was about to happen. But there's just like, okay, we've got these characters. They've got this lore, this history. As we move forward, we're going to take all of this into account as we push through and create these things that I think has really engaged certain elements of the fandom in a way that, they weren't necessarily engaged with before.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's all about picking up the threads that are available and making sure you leave enough threads around that you can weave together later. I mean, that's the key, I think, to this kind of storytelling, because just being doggedly attached to some kind of plan, I mean, we've seen time and time again how that can backfire. So, but it's a great point. And it's one of my favorite things about modern wrestling. I love older wrestling as well, for all the wonderful things it brings. And I love to see when kind of the two styles meet up to a certain extent. But yeah, it's very appreciated in the modern day that they have kind of a different way to tell stories, because when it works, it really, really works.
Let's end, Mizzy, by talking about a man we've spoken about a number of times on this podcast, Eddie Kingston. We've covered a number of his matches, but it's worth bringing it up again here. Like, it's hard to wonder what could have been had AEW been around 10 years earlier.
Sure.
Because this is like 2011 is a particularly bad time in wrestling for Eddie Kingston. All the places he could go that would offer like some sort of a living wage are blocked. TNA is being watched over by Eric Bischoff.
Yep.
He's got no interest in someone like Eddie Kingston. No. ROH is under Jim Cornette. We know what happened with Kevin Steen in ROH under Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette's not going to have any interest in Eddie Kingston. WWE is just starting to dip their toes into the indie scene, but the people that they're taking are guys like Dean Ambrose, Tyler Black / Seth Rollins, Claudio Castagnoli / Cesaro, Brody Lee. Like, they've got Vince McMahon has no interest in recruiting Eddie Kingston.
No.
But AEW, years later did, because AEW is not a promotion that was looking for wrestlers like that. They're looking for wrestlers that are different and that bring something like more of a throwback. Guys like Eddie Kingston would have got work up and down the roads in the 80s because of what he can do on the mic and the way that he can connect with the crowd. And it just makes me think, like, if Eddie Kingston had been around, if AEW had been around in 2011, when Eddie Kingston really was sort of in the early stage, the middle of his career, rather than towards the end of his career, or towards the end of the sort of what you'd call like the peak years of his career, I feel like things could have been so different for Eddie Kingston in general. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, this is a guy who's been, in my opinion, good and usually great since like 2005. So there's a lot of years there that he spent wonderfully, like doing great work, but in a place where at the time most folks weren't able to see it and, have only kind of been able to discover in retrospect, if they discover it at all. There's tons of folks who love Eddie Kingston in AEW who probably have never even seen a match from before he was there. And that's fine. Time is finite. You can't go and like see everything as much as we'd like to. It's a shame to a certain extent. And yet when I look back at the sheer quality of his career, it's not like I can say his time was wasted or anything. Like, here's a man who, in my opinion, in many ways, has been one of the shining stars of the modern era of wrestling. Who's to say that things, might not have gotten worse? What if he gets hired by TNA in 2007 and, they make a fool out of him and he loses his love of wrestling and falls out entirely? Who knows what can happen? So I'm very glad for what we did get. I'm sorry that it's been so hard for him at times. As of the time of this recording, he's back in AEW, but maybe not actually doing that much. So I'm hoping that will change because I know we've got one last big run in him at least. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's also, I'm just thinking now of, there's you change things in time and, maybe Eddie Kingston doesn't hit as hard in AEW if he doesn't have the struggle to get there. And it isn't like, wow, this guy, I was watching, last night in preparation for this, because why wouldn't you watch his debut promo where he walks out and like cuts, literally when you say the promo of his life, it's like, yeah, he changed his life in that moment. Yeah. And maybe that doesn't hit the same. Maybe that story doesn't hit the same with the AEW fans if he's literally on his last chance. He's like potentially his last wrestling match because he's sold his boots and, the rest of the law that goes with that. Maybe it doesn't hit the same. And so maybe the struggle is what he needed to get to the point he's at today. And hopefully he's got the bag and hopefully he's saving all of Tony Khan's money that he is getting paid well.
Yeah. I mean, let's just all be grateful that he didn't do like a stint in 2008 ECW on Sci-Fi and they gave him a gimmick of like a sloppy eater or something.
Oh my God.
Because a lot of worse things could have happened. So let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. Look, Mizfan, I've had a blast talking to you about this match today and talking about Chikara generally. Look, there's only so much time in the world, but Chikara just feels like a promotion that if I'd been into it, I would have been into it. Like if I'd been watching it, I would have been right into it. It just ticks so many of my boxes. And I really appreciate the time you spent talking to me about it today and also talking about this wonderful match that we got to review and dive into.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's always fun. And I am your go-to if you want to dig up any obscure things about any other AEW folks, because as you know, my wrestling taste is deep and wide, and I'll find something fun for you.
Firstly, I should ask, do you want people to find you these days? And if so, where would they find you if they want to reach out and
Honestly,
talk to you?
I kind of don't anymore. I guess find me on Twitter. Absolutely must. But if you don't already know where I am, then I don't think I'm going to tell you. So it's just not fun in the same way. I miss the forum days. I guess I'm too old now. Yeah, it's just sort of unpleasant.
You got to get into these Discords, the Discord servers where it's at. They're the new.
Yeah, that's what I hear. maybe sometime. I'm an old tired man now. I don't need to get into that like I used to. So.
Yeah. Well, look, I appreciate you still answering my Facebook messages when I post them, and every now and again I'll just post a wall of text for you about something.
For you always. I love the old crew. Did you say Imp is still doing a show?
Yeah, Imp's AEW Adventure. He changed it when Brock Lesnar returned. He changed from Imp's WWE Adventure to Imp's AEW Adventure because he finally was like, screw those guys. And so now we don't have a WWE show on Social Suplex, but you know what?
He's a good one.
Fine. There's enough WWE shows out there.
Amen to that. Well, God bless the old crew then. And if you ever talk to him, say hi for me. But that's all I got. I got nothing to plug. I'm just living my life. I'm a happy wrestling fan.
All good. Well, look, thank you for joining me. And thank you, everyone, for listening. As I said at the top, if you want to join the Social Suplex community, if you want to reach out, then you can do so on the Social Suplex Discord. We do have lots of great discussion there. It feels a bit like an old forum because you've got, it's different from Twitter. Everything's open there. I don't know about Blue Sky. I dipped my toe into Blue Sky and I just didn't feel right. And Twitter's is a house that's burning down and there's people around it and there are interesting people on there, but I don't know. I can't be bothered to find them at this point. So I stay on the Discord and there's good people on there. We keep things in check and it's interesting discussion as well. It's people who want to dig in, people who want to get stuck in. So if you want to talk about this match in particular, jump onto the AEW Match Guide thread on there. If you want to suggest a match for me to review in this fourth season that's outside of AEW, then I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear suggestions because there's so many promotions and there's so much wrestling that I don't know about. And so I'd love it if you've listened to this and you've got suggestions. Maybe it's another Chikara match. Then jump in, suggest it in that thread there. I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, you can join me next week. I've got my good friend Floyd Johnson Jr. from All Things Elite, and we're going to be talking Will Ospreay versus Shingo Takagi from New Japan, the best of the Super Juniors. That will be in a fortnight's time, in 2 weeks' time, for you Americans out there that don't know, that think Fortnite is just a video game. It'll be in 2 weeks' time. I cannot wait to review that match. It's a match that I hold very near, a night that I hold near and dear to my heart for various reasons that I'll get into on the podcast in 2 weeks' time. But thank you for joining me, and cannot wait to see you again soon. Have a great week. Bye. Thanks for listening to the AEW Match Guide podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then you can subscribe on the podcast app of your choice so you never miss an episode. Also, feel free to let me know on Twitter at Sir_Samuel. I'd love to hear from you. The AEW Match Guide podcast is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network, where you can find many other fantastic podcasts discussing not just AEW, but all parts of the world of professional wrestling. Looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Sam Brown.